Hey guys. Tonight, we're floating back in time to 18th century Kashmir, where your alarm clock is the gentle slosh of water against cedar, and your bedroom gently rocks every few minutes, not from ghosts or earthquakes, but from fish nosing around under your mattress. You're waking up in a houseboat on Dal Lake. There's no phone buzzing, no fluorescent light. Just the filtered dawn peeking through finely carved window slats, casting delicate shapes onto your blanket. Your legs are tangled in a handmade quilt, the kind that smells faintly of crushed walnut shell and winter smoke, and the air around you is heavy with that sleepy mix of damp wood, morning chai, and the faintest whisper of musk, probably from the clove-stuffed pillow your grandmother insists keeps away bad wind. Also, full disclosure, you probably wouldn't survive this life very long. It's peaceful, yes, but it's also a daily obstacle course of narrow walkways, surprise water rats, and hot teapots sliding around at exactly the wrong moment. Still, for one dreamy morning, you're here, wrapped in wool and wonder. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to tell me your local time and where you're listening from. I always love seeing which corners of the world we're sharing this moment with. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink a few more times, letting your ears catch up to your eyes. First, the creak of wood as the houseboat settles. Second, the chitter of birds outside. Tiny brown ones that perch directly on the laundry line, disrespectfully pooping on everyone's underthings like it's their full-time job. Third, the rustle of someone else already awake, probably your aunt, lighting the brazier under the samovar. There's the telltale click of the copper lid and the soft whoosh of fire. You yawn. Above you, the ceiling is low but intricate, delicately carved in floral patterns, painted long ago in faded reds and forest greens. Some of the paint flakes have fallen onto your pillow. You brush them off, smear a bit accidentally on your cheek, and blink again at the soft golden light now blooming through the slatted window, like honey spilling sideways. Dal Lake is just beyond the paper-screened wall, and it's not quiet. Not really. It's full of life. Gentle, sleepy life. The boat rocks just slightly as a canoe glides past, its oar slicing through water like silk ribbon. The man rowing it hums a song you half remember from last Eid, or maybe last wedding season. The melody curls into the air and floats under the sill. Someone calls out, soft, musical Kashmiri words you don't catch, but they're followed by the distinct thud of a melon being passed from one boat to another. You stretch beneath the quilt. The wool inside it was combed from sheep that probably still roam the hills behind Srinagar, and it smells a little like that memory. Earthy, slightly wild, somehow more comforting than the memory of a dryer sheet. Your fingers touch the floorboards. Cool, slightly damp. Beneath them, just inches away, is the lake. The actual, honest-to-goodness lake. No stilts here. This boat floats, always. It's not a raft, not a dinghy. It's a dunga, a low wooden houseboat carved from local deodar cedar, heavy with age and stories. You can't build one of these quickly. It takes months, sometimes years, and your family has lived aboard this one for generations. That mirror on the wall? It's framed in the same walnut as the side panels, carved with vines that look suspiciously like the ones climbing the boat outside. That cupboard? It hides a shelf of dried apricots, rose sugar, and a pair of hand-inked scrolls containing old family poetry. Maybe you'll read one tonight. Maybe not. You sit up, the quilt puddles into your lap. The boat rocks slightly beneath your weight, groaning in that familiar, half-affectionate way. It's like your home is sighing awake too. Someone taps on the doorframe. Your younger cousin, maybe 7 or 8, pokes her head in. Her braids are already done, tied in red wool thread, and her cheeks are pink from scrubbing. She whispers, "They made rice pancakes. Hurry!" You nod, still not speaking. In this family, mornings start slowly, like snow melt. You shuffle toward the doorway, past the low dresser where your wool socks are folded like sleepy caterpillars, past the tiny shelf with the clay oil lamp and the iron tongs for coal. You duck beneath a paper lantern and pause at the screen door. Then, barefoot, you step out into the morning light. The balcony is barely 2 feet wide and floats just above the surface of the water. The sun is rising behind the mountains in the east, casting a buttery gold shimmer across the lake that looks exactly like someone spilled ghee on glass. You lean over the rail, and there's your reflection. Sleep-tousled hair, drowsy eyes, and a single speck of paint still on your cheek. The water ripples, and your face disappears, replaced by the passing shadow of a duck. It quacks softly. Somewhere behind you, a frying pan sizzles. You breathe in. Let the steam and cedar wrap around your ribs. There is nowhere else you need to be. No cart to catch, no desk to rush toward. Just a house that floats, and a day beginning not with a bang, but with a paddle's hush. You shuffle back from the balcony with your toes curled slightly against the cool cedar planks. Every floorboard on this boat has a slight give, a spring to it, as if the whole thing's sighing with you, or perhaps groaning in sympathy. Either way, it makes for a very specific soundtrack to your mornings, a kind of wooden whispering beneath each step. You follow the scent of breakfast through the narrow hallway, ducking under a line of drying herbs strung across the ceiling. Mint, fenugreek, and something vaguely piney that your aunt swears repels colds, but mostly just repels your cousin who hates the smell. The kitchen, or galley if you're feeling nautical, isn't really a room. It's more of a carved-out corner in the middle of the boat, with low shelves, hanging ladles, and a wood-burning clay stove that sits stubbornly in the exact place everyone needs to pass. A brass samovar puffs gently in the corner, surrounded by copper cups already fogging with steam. You make your way towards the water basin first, where your cousin has thoughtfully placed a shallow bowl of ash soap and a copper lota for rinsing. The water's cold, scooped straight from the lake earlier, and filtered through 3 layers of muslin. You splash your face, flinch, and fully wake up all at once. Time for teeth. Now, in modern life, you may be used to toothpaste that comes in neat, minty tubes. But here, you grab a twig. Not just any twig, though. This one's been softened on the end and smells sharply of spice and tree bark. It's a miswak stick from a Salvadora persica tree. And yes, it's basically nature's toothbrush. You chew the tip to fray it, until it's like a miniature broom, and then start brushing. There's a mild bitterness, followed by a curious numbing tingle that makes your tongue feel slightly too big for your mouth. But it works. Leaves your breath spicy, and your teeth faintly gritty, like you've been kissed by cinnamon and bark at the same time. Historians still argue whether the miswak was primarily used in Kashmir for oral hygiene or as a kind of medicinal ritual. Some say it was tied to purification. Others insist it was just more convenient than hauling a brush across a wobbly boat. Either way, it feels oddly satisfying to chew your way into a smile. You spit gently into a slotted wooden drain that leads straight into a small filtration tank hanging beneath the boat. Nothing gets dumped directly into the lake. Your aunt made sure of that years ago, declaring that laziness will be what sinks us, not water. There's a towel hanging nearby. Thin cotton, embroidered at the corners with delicate pink tulips. You dry your face and note, as always, that it still smells faintly of yesterday's cardamom. You pass by the hearth again, and your aunt is stirring a pan of thick batter on a flat griddle. She grunts at you, not unkindly. "You slept like a boulder," she says. "Someone could have tied your feet and sold you to a floating merchant." You smile, half asleep, and shuffle toward the low table already set for breakfast. There are 3 rice pancakes on a carved walnut platter, each browned unevenly, but folded into neat triangles. Beside them, a dish of fresh curd, a small bowl of chili chutney, and a heap of pickled lotus root slices so red they practically glow in the morning light. You sit cross-legged on the floor cushion and immediately feel the boat tilt slightly under your weight. Everything in this world moves. It's a rhythm you stop noticing after a while, until it goes still, which is somehow worse. Your aunt pours tea into copper cups. Not the pink, salty noon chai, not yet. But a sweet saffron brew laced with a few threads still floating at the top. You sip it slowly, the metal cool against your lips. It tastes like sunlight filtered through spice cabinets. Your cousin sits beside you and tears her pancake into pieces with one hand, dipping it first into chutney, then curd. You copy her rhythm, content to follow the path well trodden. As you eat, a flock of herons glides silently past the window, their wings nearly brushing the carved lattice. The sunlight has shifted now, streaming in long slices across the breakfast spread. Your aunt mutters something about drying the socks before noon, or risking lake feet, which no one wants to discuss at breakfast. Once you've finished, there's the matter of dishes. But not the kind you toss in a sink and forget. No, here. You stack everything into a shallow bamboo tray and pass it through the small service hatch at the back of the boat. A neighbor's canoe is already sidled up alongside, ready to trade a basket of dried apricots for yesterday's linen and a refill of firewood. She waves at you, this neighbor, her head wrapped in a saffron-dyed shawl, cheeks dusted with flour. "Your rooster is lazy," she calls. "He's reflective," your aunt replies. The boat rocks gently as the basket is passed over, and your cousin sighs. "I wish I was a rooster." "You wish you were an apricot," your aunt says. "At least then you'd be useful dried." You finish your tea, lick a bit of chutney from your thumb, and stretch your arms until your shoulders crack like old ice. The morning has unfolded slowly, like the soft petals of a lake flower. You're warm, fed, and clean, by 18th century standards anyway. You've survived the ash soap, the miswak twig, and your aunt's gentle insults. And now, the lake calls again. Not with urgency, but with invitation. You shuffle back through the narrow cedar passage, now trailing the warm scent of tea and breakfast. Your belly is full, your breath faintly tinged with twig, and the boat tilts lazily underfoot as you duck past another curtain of drying herbs. This one more decorative than medicinal. Tiny bundles of lavender, bay leaf, and rose petals, strung like laundry by someone with a flair for botany and interior design. Now it's time to get to know the vessel you call home, not just in the "this is where you sleep" kind of way, but with the full reverence a floating house deserves. The boat, known in Kashmiri as a dunga, is carved entirely of seasoned deodar cedar. Deodar, meaning divine wood in Sanskrit, is sturdy, water-resistant, and fragrant in that ancient library meets forest sort of way. It's a wood that breathes with you. When the lake air gets thick and wet, the cedar swells protectively. When it's dry, the planks contract just enough to remind you of the delicate balance your home rests on. You run your fingers along the paneling as you walk. The grains are wide, rich with color, and occasionally marred by the tiniest carved initials, generations of occupants who couldn't resist leaving their mark. One faded L is followed by a bird shape and a questionably carved fish. You wonder which great-aunt thought that looked like a trout. The main room is a low-slung space with layered carpets in deep burgundy and gold tones. Your steps sink into the floor, quite literally. Beneath the carpets are thick pads of compressed wool, designed not just for comfort, but insulation. Because when winter comes, the lake doesn't freeze, but the air bites harder than any cousin's sarcasm. A central brass brazier sits on a fireproof slab. It's not lit right now, but you've seen it glow red and hum with heat when needed. Around it, the seating arrangement is a curious circle of mismatched cushions and embroidered bolsters, an aesthetic the family jokingly calls opulent storage panic. Every pillow hides something. Old letters, silver bangles, a hand mirror wrapped in silk. Treasure, basically. You step toward the small alcove on the right. This is your sleeping nook. A carved cedar bed frame, low to the floor, with drawers tucked beneath. Each drawer has its own faded label, written in an elegant calligraphy so curly, you're not entirely sure if one says socks or sweets. You resist opening the one that might have dried mulberries. For now, overhead, the ceiling is low enough to kiss with your forehead if you stand up too fast. But it's not plain. Oh no. It's painted in tiny, careful scenes. Vines and deer, tulips curling around golden paisleys, a single boat with no oars floating beneath a moon that looks suspiciously like a samosa. Scholars still debate the origin of this style. Was it Mughal? Persian? Local craftsmanship influenced by wandering artisans from the Silk Road? Historians lean toward a blend, but that's just fancy academic talk for we're not quite sure, but it's lovely, isn't it? A tiny bookshelf is built into the far wall. You crouch down and finger the spines. A mix of poetry scrolls, hand-bound journals, and a few pressed flowers long past their prime. You find a walnut tucked behind one book, a prize left behind by your younger cousin, no doubt. Or maybe a squirrel. Or possibly the houseboat itself, slowly becoming sentient. Every corner of the boat has a dual function. The shelf above the samovar isn't just for extra teacups. It's where your uncle stores his fishing line and half-finished letters to people he pretends not to miss. The wall mirror in the corridor flips down to reveal a chessboard. Yes, a folding chessboard. You try to imagine a tense match in the middle of a rainstorm, and the thought is both delightful and very damp. There's also the matter of the boat's underside. You lift one of the carpeted floor panels, carefully, and peek beneath. Not the water itself, but the storage well. A carved compartment lined with tarred canvas. Inside are winter provisions, dried morels, rice packed in cloth, salt stones, mustard seed, and one sealed jar labeled "Do not open unless Auntie says." You close it quickly. The houseboat has a back deck, too, narrower than the front, but quieter. You squeeze past the kitchen again and step out into the filtered sunlight. The back is where laundry dries, fish are scaled, and private arguments occur in hushed, dramatic tones. No one's out right now, so it's just you, the breeze, and a view of another houseboat across the canal, painted deep green and rocking ever so slightly, like a grandmother settling into her nap. You spot a pigeon perched on a lantern, puffed up like he owns the place. He probably does. You nod respectfully. You linger there, fingertips on the rail, watching the lake glitter between the wooden ribs of other boats. Some are painted bright blues and yellows. Others remain unpainted, letting the wood speak for itself. There's an informal beauty contest happening all the time here. Whose boat is the cleanest? Whose pots have the brightest flowers? Who has the most impressive carpet fluttering on their line? The floating life is part survival, part slow-motion theater. And your boat? She's solid. Not flashy, but proud. With her carved window shutters, brass hinges, and tiny compartment for letters and dried rose petals, she's a whole world balanced between sky and water. You pat the rail, like you would a loyal animal. She creaks in response. Good morning, girl. You head back inside, ducking through the curtain again, the scent of lake mist clinging faintly to your sleeves. The houseboat waits behind you, steady and swaying, always halfway between drifting off and standing firm. Back inside, the boat feels even warmer now. Sunlight is slanting through the carved lattice in golden slices, and the smells of tea, rosewood, and damp wool hang together like old friends in the same gossip circle. You head toward the open-air passage that wraps along one side of the boat. Part hallway, part social stage. Because it's time for the real morning event. The slow-motion parade of floating neighbors. This is the hour when everyone becomes an anthropologist without meaning to. You lean against the doorway with a piece of dried apple in your mouth and quietly watch the life float by. Literally, the first boat to pass is piloted by a boy no older than 12. He stands barefoot in a wide canoe, steering it with a long oar almost twice his height. His load? Firewood stacked with questionable balance, a woven basket of turnips, and a goat sitting calmly near the bow like royalty. The goat nods at you as if to say, "Yes, I approve of your quilt." Next comes a woman in a crimson shawl. She's paddling her canoe one-handed while adjusting a brass nose ring with the other. You recognize her instantly, the local auntie who knows everything about everyone. She doesn't need to ask questions. She just listens to the lake. She pulls up next to your boat, not to say hello, but to inspect your family's laundry line with an expression of light judgment. She mutters, glancing at the slowly drying socks. "You people iron under things now? We never used to iron under things." "Some people prefer elegance beneath the surface," your aunt replies from the kitchen. The woman smiles, the kind of smile that has launched 100 rumors. "Tell your cousin she walks too loudly. The other boats are starting to complain." And just like that, she's off again, her canoe gliding forward like she's on some royal inspection tour of the Floating Gossip Federation. This is what morning means in a Kashmiri houseboat. Not just tea and tooth twigs, but a kind of gently chaotic social ballet. Every sound, every paddle splash, every clank of metal on wood carries meaning. You don't always need to speak. You just need to notice. Further down the canal, a pair of young men are attempting to guide a second-hand canoe through a tight bend. One of them drops his paddle, curses softly, and tries to steer with a fishing net instead. You and your cousin both smirk. Houseboat traffic jams are very real and surprisingly full of drama. You lean back, resting your head on the cedar wall behind you, and let the morning go by in slow, fragrant slices. Other boats pass, some stacked with vegetables, some empty except for a man lying flat on his back with a cat perched on his stomach. A woman floats by selling handmade combs and bone hairpins. She gestures at her wares with one hand and stirs a pot of lentils with the other. True multitasking. Some boats have signs, written in thick Kashmiri script, that say things like medicinal herbs, or wool for sale, or, cryptically, mangoes when available. One says lute lessons, in slightly crooked calligraphy, and a small boy appears to be demonstrating said lessons by plucking 2 strings and singing about a duck that stole his slipper. There is no escaping the slow intimacy of a floating neighborhood. Walls don't hold secrets well on water. Historians still argue whether this social closeness was a practical adaptation to lake living or a cultural artifact carried over from village traditions. One school of thought says it emerged from shared survival needs. Another says Kashmiris just enjoy observing each other with maximum curiosity and minimum shame. Probably both. You head toward the front deck again, munching on the last bit of dried apple. The sun has climbed higher, warming the surface of the lake to a soft glitter. You spot the familiar yellow canoe of the walnut merchant, its hull painted with tiny stars. He's moored beside your neighbor's boat, arguing over the price of kernels while casually tossing walnut shells into the water. Beside him floats a small child, no more than 5, in her own miniature canoe. She's wearing a crown made of reeds and appears to be steering with a ladle. No one stops her. In fact, someone throws her a piece of dried fig like an offering. This is the rhythm of lake life. gentle, circular, strangely democratic. Every day, everyone gets a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more creative with their boat gear. You head inside again, brushing your hand along the carved doorway. The intricate floral designs are warm from the sun, and you swear one of the tulip petals looks suspiciously like a parrot. Probably intentional, or maybe not. Everything in a houseboat has a story. And sometimes that story is someone carved a parrot because they were bored during the monsoon. You pass your aunt, who's now darning a sock while humming a lullaby that somehow sounds like both a warning and a prayer. Your cousin is organizing a stack of spice jars that have been alphabetized according to your great-uncle's invented system, which includes categories like makes you dream and don't ask. A breeze slips through the window slats, carrying in the scent of frying onions from a boat 3 doors down. Someone's making paneer. You make a mental note to casually drop by later, armed with flattery and a clean bowl. The lake continues murmuring outside, but inside, everything quiets. You realize, as you settle cross-legged back onto the cushion, that you're part of something woven, something floating and grounded all at once. A tapestry of cedar and water and gossip and lullabies. And goats. Don't forget the goats. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the houseboat breathe beneath you. You don't know who's coming next, but you'll hear their paddle before you see them. And that's enough. You stay curled in the warmth of your cushion, but your ears are already tugged forward by a familiar hiss and pop, like the boat's about to whisper something particularly tasty. That's right. It's time for the real hero of the day to appear. Noon chai. The pink one. The tea you sipped earlier was sweet, laced with saffron. But this? This is the tea of grandmothers, of poets, of people who say, "Come sit," when you weren't planning to, but now suddenly have hours free. Noon chai is its own invitation. You make your way back into the kitchen nook, where your aunt is now conducting a slow-motion ballet of ladles and clattering brass lids. A large, dented copper pot sits directly over the clay stove, filled nearly to the brim with water, green tea leaves, and a few secret ingredients that change slightly depending on who's making it. The air smells faintly of earth and salt, and something floral that might be dried rose or just poetic license. She glances at you, nods toward the ladle. You're helping. You step into the steam, grip the long-handled spoon, and begin stirring in a slow, patient spiral. Never too fast, or the leaves might get offended. The goal here isn't to boil, but to coax. Noon chai is not in a rush, and neither should you be. Now comes the magic. Your aunt adds a pinch of baking soda. Yes, baking soda. The pot hisses as the soda hits, and the tea turns a curious shade of green-gray, which doesn't feel promising. But you trust the process. Next comes the milk, ladled in slowly, carefully, until the potion transforms. The dull gray hue melts into a soft blush, then deepens into a milky, dusty pink. It's like watching rose petals dissolve into clouds. Historians still argue over the origin of noon chai's distinct pink color. Was it a Mughal invention? A Himalayan fluke? A happy chemical accident discovered by someone who dropped their baking soda while trying to make bread? No one knows for certain. What's clear is this. Noon chai is not just a drink. It's an event. You ladle the bubbling brew into copper cups, wider than the morning ones, for better cooling and sipping, and sprinkle each with crushed almonds, dried rose petals, and a single cardamom seed. A little snack with your tea? Of course. A few fried rice fritters on a banana leaf, crisp and absurdly good. You sit cross-legged at the low table again, cup in hand, steam rising into your face like a gentle fog that smells slightly like salted pudding. The first sip is always surprising. Salty, rich, creamy, and completely at odds with your brain's sweet expectations. The salt isn't overwhelming. It's just enough to make you blink once, pause, and realize you suddenly want a sweater, a poem, and a long gossip session. Your cousin slurps her tea dramatically, cheeks puffing from the steam. "Who invented salty tea?" she whispers. Your aunt doesn't look up. Someone with no sugar and a lot of opinions. You sip again. Slower this time. The warmth spreads through your belly, across your chest, down into your fingertips. The tea is dense, like it could hold secrets if it wanted to. You're suddenly sure of it. This is a drink that remembers things. Storms, birthdays, arguments, the quiet click of embroidery needles in the other room. Maybe even the names of ducks. Outside, the lake laps softly against the hull, as if even the water is sipping something warm and pink. A neighbor knocks on the hull with her paddle. 3 quick taps, and your aunt stands, gathering a fresh cup and another fritter. It's custom here. You bring tea before someone asks. You offer snacks without expectation. You treat strangers like relatives you haven't argued with yet. You watch as she steps outside, balances the tray on one hip, and hands it down into the other boat. There's a quick exchange. Laughter, a muttered complaint about someone's noisy rooster, and then the tray returns, now with a new bundle of dried apricots tied in red string. You turn back to your cup, now nearly empty. The dregs at the bottom are thick and salty. You stir it once with your finger, because tradition says the final sip carries the mood for the rest of the day. You drain it just in case it's true. Then, with a sigh that feels older than you are, you stretch back onto the cushion and stare at the papier-mâché ceiling fan above. It's not moving, of course. It's decorative, painted in gold and green swirls, a gift from your great-uncle who once tried to sell his poetry in Peshawar and came back with 50 fans instead. You smile at the memory. The fan doesn't cool the air, but it gives the ceiling something to talk about. Your cousin begins plucking at the lute in the corner. A tune that starts off melodic, drifts into confusion, and ends in a triumphant chord that might be borrowed from a goat's sneeze. You clap softly anyway. Noon chai slows the day. It doesn't stop time, but it folds it gently, like laundry. You feel full but not stuffed, alert but not hurried, warm but not drowsy. Everything in your limbs says, maybe I'll nap, and everything in your brain says, but this light is so pretty. You step outside again, onto the front deck. The tea has put a slight blush in your cheeks. The sun gleams against your cup, and the lake ripples around you like a soft pink echo. You set the cup down. You breathe. You float. The sun climbs a little higher, and with it, the houseboat's tempo shifts. Not faster, just different. The tea has mellowed everyone's bones, and now the midday hush takes over. Lazy, golden, the kind that makes time feel syrupy. Outside, the lake glistens with that half-awake shimmer that only comes around noon, when the world agrees to speak a little softer. You stretch your legs and wander toward the storage corner. Not because you need anything, but because it's the sort of hour where poking through drawers counts as activity. The floor creaks companionably beneath you. The boat never complains. She just murmurs, constantly adjusting to your weight like an old cat. At the end of the hallway is the utility chest. It's older than you, older than your father, maybe older than the idea of keys. You crouch, unlatch the brass hook, and lift the lid. Inside, a jumble of practical magic. There are neatly coiled ropes, long-handled paddles carved with faded designs, a wind compass that no one uses anymore but still keeps just in case, and a wooden box of sundries labeled Misk Mostly Dry. That box holds flintstones, a broken spinning top, an old set of dice, 3 painted marbles, and a folded list of boat chores written in a script so tidy it feels passive-aggressive. You take out a small net bag filled with dried lavender buds and sniff it experimentally. Still strong. You tuck it into your sleeve like a secret and close the chest. From down the hall, your aunt calls out, "Take the sweep brush and check the roof." Now, normally, you'd argue. But you're still full of salty tea and goodwill, so you grab the long-handled broom hanging by the door and step outside. The houseboat has a gently sloped rooftop, a flat surface just wide enough for repairs, storage, and the occasional very careful nap. You step up the rickety ladder, each rung worn smooth by 1,000 cautious feet. The top plank creaks dramatically, as if to remind you it's doing its best. You stand tall. The view is worth the climb. From up here, the lake stretches in every direction, dotted with other boats and low wooden platforms. Beyond the canal, rooftops glint in the afternoon light. Temples, mosques, merchant homes, each one nestled into the green arms of the mountains. The Himalayas loom like drowsy sentinels beyond the valley, still capped with snow, even as the lowlands sweat. You sweep slowly, methodically. It's not about dust. It's about leaves, twigs, little feathers that drift down during the night and settle like curious house guests. You push them all gently off the edge, watching them tumble into the water with tiny splashes. As you sweep, you pause to adjust the stones placed on the four corners of the roof. These aren't just weights, they're boat wisdom. Each one helps counterbalance the slow drift of the wind and keeps the roof from acting like an impromptu sail. Historians still argue whether this technique originated in Dal Lake or was borrowed from Central Asian lake cultures, but either way, it's brilliantly mundane. You stop for a moment and sit cross-legged on the roof. The wood is warm under your thighs, radiating stored sunlight. A pair of dragonflies whir past your head, locked in their own dance. You squint toward the west and spot a narrow waterway that snakes between lotus beds, one that only small boats can pass through. You make a mental note to suggest a paddle trip there tomorrow. Below you, the boat rocks slightly as your cousin steps out with a pot of water, probably to wash the chutney bowl. She glances up and shouts, "If you fall, I'm not fishing you out. You'll ruin my socks." "I'll haunt your sock drawer," you reply. "You already do." You smile and stand, brushing the dust from your hands. The sky above is cloudless, that kind of wide-open blue that makes your lungs stretch just a little more. You climb carefully back down, the ladder groaning like it, too, wants a nap. Inside, the shadows are longer now, softening at the edges. You pass through the hallway again, fingers grazing the carved wall. This one panel has always caught your eye. A lattice of walnut leaves swirling around a single phoenix. Or maybe it's a pigeon pretending. The eye has faded, but the wing remains bold, almost defiant. The houseboat's decorations aren't just flourishes. They tell stories of changing seasons, of long journeys, of craftspeople who carved their initials into the frames as if daring time to forget them. You remember your grandmother once saying that every houseboat has its own sound. Some creak high, some low, some groan only when guests arrive. Yours sings in a soft, persistent rhythm, a deep belly hum, like someone playing a flute 2 boats away. And then there's the stove again. The kitchen corner has returned to quiet, but not dormancy. Your aunt's left the lid slightly open so the embers stay warm. You can see the shimmer of heat inside, the kind that would toast your palms if you hovered too long. You sit on the floor cushion and fan yourself with an old palm leaf menu from a floating bakery that went out of business 5 years ago. The paper smells faintly of honey. The breeze catches the corner, and you let it flap for a moment before pressing it flat again. Your cousin has begun rearranging the spice jars again. this time sorting by pleasantness of smell. "What category is Asafoetida in?" you ask. "Emergency." You laugh quietly. Outside, the lake murmurs like a kettle about to sing. The air is thick with sunshine, softened by the scent of distant lotuses and damp cedar. Somewhere far off, a flute begins to play. A slow, spiraling tune that twists through the reeds and settles in your bones like memory. You don't know if it's a song you've heard before or just one the lake invented. Either way, it fits. So you stay still, you breathe, and you listen. You stay on the cushion a while longer, just breathing with the boat. It sways beneath you with a rhythm so even, so drowsy, that your eyelids droop despite your best efforts to remain alert. But then, a soft knock on the hull, a rhythm you recognize, pulls you back up like a fishing line. 3 slow taps, pause, then 2 short ones. The mailboat. Yes, mailboat. Because even floating homes need correspondence. And in 18th century Kashmir, there's a whole subculture of rowers whose job it is to paddle up and down the canals carrying handwritten notes, tiny bundles, and the occasional very nosy poem. You step out onto the front deck, where the boatman has already tied his canoe loosely to your railing. He's old, gruff-looking in that lovable way, with eyebrows that look like they've weathered every monsoon, and maybe even remember the Mughal era. "Letter for your aunt," he says, and a package from that silk seller with the mustache. He hands over a cloth-wrapped bundle and a thin scroll tied with gold thread. Your aunt appears just in time to snatch the scroll from your hands, muttering something about "finally," and if he sent more pink silk, I'll bury him in it. The boatman laughs, which sounds like gravel being politely shaken. You hand him a pouch of dried apricots and a folded reply note tied in twine. He pockets both without comment. In this world, fruit is currency, and small favors float faster than coins. He pushes off with a quiet splash and disappears around the bend, his oar slicing the water with a practiced grace. You sit back down on the deck, legs dangling over the edge. The package from the silk merchant rests beside you. Your aunt is already halfway down the hall, muttering and unraveling the thread. Curiosity gets the better of you. You peek. Inside the cloth, a long strip of dusty lavender silk, smooth as melted moonlight. Tucked inside is also a sprig of dried jasmine and a note. Half a verse, no signature. "He never signs," your aunt calls from behind you, like a psychic with too many brothers. You leave the silk folded where it is. Let it bask in the sun for now. You lie back on the wooden deck, arms spread, eyes closed. The scent of jasmine clings to your fingertips. From somewhere nearby, the scent of fried chilies wafts in, followed by a shouted recipe exchange between 2 neighbors who are either mortal enemies or siblings. It's always hard to tell. And then, clang, the bell chimes, lunch, or more accurately, the signal that someone has dropped a ladle, which in this household is interpreted as, "Come before the food gets cold, and your portion gets smaller out of spite." You scramble up and head inside, brushing cedar dust from your sleeves. Lunch today is rice, as always, fluffy and steamed, with every grain behaving like it was raised by etiquette tutors. Alongside it, a spinach and mustard green dish slow-cooked in clay, pickled tamarind, and a fish curry that smells like lake secrets and turmeric. The fish, you're informed, was caught this morning by your great-uncle's neighbor's cousin, which means somehow it belongs to everyone and no one. Communal fish, if you will. You eat with your hands, as is proper. The rice is warm, the greens tangy, the fish soft and spicy in that creeping, cozy way that builds warmth from the inside out. The pickles nearly make you sneeze, but it's worth it. Your cousin passes you a folded napkin, embroidered with what looks like a badly behaved horse. "Is that a unicorn?" you ask. "It's ambition," she replies. Outside, the lake sighs, disturbed only by the occasional paddle or drifting weed. A butterfly lands briefly on the window lattice, then flutters off again. perhaps offended by the pickled tamarind. You take your time. Meals here aren't rushed. They're treated like slow festivals, celebrated with spices and tiny arguments. The table conversation meanders, from the texture of rice to the story of the floating tailor who once accidentally sewed his pants closed while napping mid-stitch. You finish with a single date stuffed with crushed almonds, a sweet, sticky punctuation mark. After the meal, your aunt insists everyone must lie down for at least 20 minutes. Not a nap, per se, just horizontal reflection. It's a ritual, not a suggestion. You find your sleeping nook and stretch out on the thick mattress, its cotton cover still faintly warm from the sun filtering through the window. Above you, the painted ceiling shows a forest scene. Deer tiptoeing around a still pond, tiny birds perched on blossoms that never wilt. You trace one of the painted branches with your finger, then let your arm fall back onto your chest. The sounds around you blur. Lake water lapping gently against wood, a neighbor's cough, the rattle of drying peppers swaying in their basket near the stove. You don't fall asleep, not exactly, but your thoughts drift, and that's enough. The air is thick with quiet now. Not silence, because silence never truly exists on a houseboat, but something gentler. A layered stillness stitched with familiar sounds. The creak of wood, a distant splash, the flap of laundry shifting in the breeze like a row of sleepy flags. You blink up at the painted deer one last time and rise slowly, your limbs heavy in that satisfying just-fed way. You drift toward the rear deck. It's the place where things just happen. Spices get dried. Fish are scaled. Hair is combed with deliberate slowness. Today, though, it's taken on a new purpose. Dyeing cloth. Your aunt is already out there, sleeves rolled, hands stained red from crushed madder root. The stone basin at her feet is half filled with water dyed the color of late roses, and from the nearby railing hang a series of soaking shawls, their ends dripping rhythmically into a sloshing copper bucket. "Come help," she says, not looking up. Of course, she means watch and hand things over, which you are quite good at. You sit on the woven mat beside her and take in the slow, mesmerizing process. The cloth is dipped, wrung, and dipped again, each time soaking in more color, more scent, more warmth from the sun. You hand her the mordant powder wrapped in a twist of paper. Alum and wood ash, she explains, keep the color from running. Not that you asked. Aunties love a willing listener. Historians still argue whether these dye methods originated locally or arrived via wandering Central Asian traders. Some claim the roots of the dye tradition go back to the Indus Valley. Others swear a specific madder strain grows only beside this lake, lending the red a softness that refuses to fade. Your aunt hums as she works, her fingers dancing through the scarlet water. You realize that, much like the tea or the carved beams, this cloth carries a kind of time, a memory made visible. Suddenly, your cousin appears behind you, holding a large bundle of damp marigold petals. "You're doing yellow next," she grins. "Or do you want to argue with Auntie about it?" You absolutely do not. So you help spread the petals on a second cloth, layering them like you're assembling the slowest salad in the world. The petals are crushed gently, releasing a pungent perfume that clings to your fingertips. The scent hits you, a mix of citrus, sunlight, and something slightly bitter. Not unpleasant, just honest. You tie the cloth into a loose bundle, like a dumpling, and lower it into a separate vat of warm water already yellowed by the first batch. The cloth sighs as it sinks. You imagine it enjoying the bath far more than it should. While the dye sets, you lean against the deck railing and look down at the lake. Your reflections shimmer back at you in fragments, your face wavy and doubled by the water's slow pulse. Next to you, A boat drifts by carrying a man in layered wool, playing a flute shaped like a swan. The notes trail behind him like silk in the wind. You glance over at your cousin. She's watching too, head tilted. "Do you think he knows he sounds sad?" she whispers. You shrug. "Or maybe he's happy and the flute is lying." She smiles. "Like your face when you eat sour pickles." You nudge her with your elbow. The dying continues. Slow and meditative. The sun begins to angle lower, casting shadows that ripple across the marigold petals now soaking in the vat. Every few minutes, your aunt lifts a corner of cloth to inspect the depth of color, squinting like a jeweler. By now your hands are stained, one red, one yellow, and you hold them up in the light, admiring your unintentional artistry. You briefly consider leaving them like this, statement hands. In the distance, you hear a faint tapping sound. 2 sticks, struck together rhythmically. The signal of the bread boat. You perk up. The bread boat is a marvel. A small canoe carrying a tandoor oven built into its middle, manned by a very serious woman who bakes flatbreads while floating. She appears with no schedule, no warning, just the quiet slap of oars and the scent of ash and yeast. Today, she appears like a mirage. Her canoe glides toward your deck, and she gives a curt nod. You rush inside to fetch a small packet of dried fish and a string of fresh chili. The traditional trade. In return, she hands you 2 rounds of chochwar, the local bread. Flat, dense, layered like thin blankets. Still hot. The warmth seeps into your palms as you carry them back, resisting the very real temptation to rip off a corner and eat it with nothing on it. Your cousin, however, has no such hesitation. She tears one open, stuffs it with pickled radish and leftover fish, and takes a triumphant bite. "Bless the lake," she says, mouth full. You follow suit. The bread is crispy at the edges, chewy in the middle, and smoky from the floating oven. Somehow it tastes like everything and nothing, in the best way. Auntie hands you a warm cloth bundle, dyed and rinsed. "Hang this to dry," she says, like she's assigning you a mystical quest. You clip the cloth to the line with carved wooden pegs shaped like ducks. The breeze catches the fresh dye and lifts the fabric gently, making it look like a banner of celebration. Or a flag announcing, "We made this, and the lake helped." The air thickens slightly. Not with storm or threat, but with the knowledge that evening is creeping closer. The sun begins its slow golden lean across the rooftops and masts. Shadows stretch like sleepy cats. The water cools just a little. You rub your hands together, now streaked with colors, and feel an odd satisfaction. You didn't do much today. Sipped tea, watched dye soak into cloth, traded fish for bread, but it all feels purposeful. Like each slow act is a thread tying you deeper into this floating world. You rest your chin on the deck railing and close your eyes. The lake, it seems, is always watching. And today it smiles. The golden hour in Kashmir doesn't tiptoe in. It strolls, unhurried and assured, like someone who knows they're the prettiest guest at the party. The sun stretches across the lake now in long ribbons of amber, and even the ducks, who have spent the day squabbling over imaginary boundaries, suddenly seem agreeable, paddling side by side like seasoned diplomats. You sit back against the cedar railing, arms loose, mind looser. The dyed cloths flutter behind you, glowing like captured sunlight in marigold and madder. Each one swings gently in the breeze, dripping a little more color into the lake with every sway. It's not pollution. It's poetry. The scent of the bread still lingers on your fingers, mingling with the sharper herbal note from the dried lavender you tucked in your sleeve earlier. You pull it out now, give it a light squeeze, and breathe in. It's the kind of smell that makes you believe time isn't real, or at least not urgent. A small wooden box sits near your feet, carved long ago by someone who liked swirls and leaves and was deeply committed to symmetry. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded indigo cloth, is your great-grandfather's inkstone. It's worn smooth in the middle, with one corner chipped from the time it fell into the lake, and was rescued 3 hours later by a very determined boy with excellent breath control. You pour a little water into the inkstone and begin grinding the solid ink stick in circles, watching the dark liquid bloom slowly. The lake mirrors the movement, ripples in ripples. Your cousin sits beside you, producing a stack of rough paper made from pressed reeds. "We're writing letters," she says, not asking. You nod. There's no postal urgency here, but letters are more than communication. They're ceremony. Gossip becomes epic. Apologies become art. Compliments spiral into couplets. And if your handwriting slants a bit, well, that just adds flair. Your aunt joins, her ink-stained fingers already wrapped around a pen made from polished reed. She begins without preamble, scribbling furiously. From the sound of her sighs, you gather it's a shopping list disguised as an elegy. You, however, decide to write a message for no one in particular. "Today the lake tasted like dye water and baked fish, and I was content." You pause. Add a drawing of a goat wearing a bonnet. Why not? Your cousin is doodling miniature houseboats along the margins of her page, each one slightly different. One has a flower-shaped roof. One is covered in stars. One appears to be floating on top of an enormous cabbage. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether written correspondence on the lakes ever served formal political purposes. Some say important alliances were coordinated by ink and paddle here, long before bureaucrats caught on. Others insist it was just a way for bored poets to test new metaphors on captive neighbors. Whatever the truth, the ritual remains. You finish your note and fold it neatly, pressing a lavender bud into the crease. Later, you'll tuck it into a box with dozens of others. Unsent, unread, but not unloved. The evening call to prayer rises faintly from a mosque across the lake, its song curling through the breeze like ribbon smoke. You sit still as it echoes, then fades, leaving only the soft murmuring of paddles and waterbirds behind. Your aunt lights a copper oil lamp and sets it in the center of the deck. The flame dances, tiny and stubborn. Around it, the shadows stretch longer. The carved walls of the houseboat take on a deeper glow, like they're remembering old conversations. A neighbor floats by, his canoe full of plump green cucumbers. He raises one in a silent offer. You raise 3 fingers. Trade? He tosses the cucumber. You toss back a hand-sewn sachet filled with salt and chili. A perfect exchange. "You know," your cousin says, holding the cucumber up like a prized fish, "this one looks wise." "Name it," you reply. "Kukum Ali Shah." It's a terrible joke. You both laugh anyway. The light dips lower, now golden red, painting everything in sleepy affection. You see your reflection in the lake again, doubled by shadow and fading sun. You look soft, quiet, like someone who's lived on a boat their entire life, even if it's only been a few days. Inside, your aunt is already preparing the hearth for the evening meal. Lentils soak. Rice is rinsed. Spoons clink like miniature gongs. You remain outside a while longer, pressing your toes against the wooden floorboards, counting the slow stretch of dusk across the mountains. A heron glides low across the surface, its wings so close to the water they leave trailing silver lines behind. You glance down at your unfinished ink, dark and gleaming. You swirl your finger through it once, watching the lines spiral. It's easy to imagine that the ink carries memories, that someone, someday, will grind it again and see echoes of this evening. You place the inkstone back into its box and close the lid gently, as if sealing a secret. The lamp flickers behind you, and the boat sways, and the lake listens. The oil lamp flickers again, as if agreeing with some thought you haven't spoken aloud. The breeze has turned cooler now, tinged with moisture rising off the lake. The mountain peaks, once glowing with honey-colored light, begin to fade into soft indigo silhouettes. You stretch your legs and walk quietly toward the edge of the deck, where night is already brushing the ripples with a velvet hand. Inside, the familiar clatter of clay pots and brass ladles signals that dinner is beginning its slow birth. But out here, under the deepening sky, there's still a little space left for wandering thoughts. Your cousin has disappeared, likely conscripted into onion slicing duty, which, in this houseboat, is considered a noble sacrifice. Your aunt moves in practiced silence, sliding between shelves and spice jars like she's part of the kitchen's architecture. Every movement seems choreographed, down to the stirring of lentils that have now been simmering for what feels like a small lifetime. You take your usual place on the kitchen step, which serves as both a perch and a diplomatic neutral zone. From here, you can watch everything, help occasionally, and, most importantly, snack freely without entering the full chaos. A bowl of chopped radish with lemon and salt is passed your way. It's a taste that wakes the back of your mouth in a very specific, almost legally binding way. "Don't eat too much," your aunt warns. You nod but do not stop. She opens the lid of the rice pot, releasing a plume of steam that smells like clouds, if clouds had souls and were very good at cooking. The lentils bubble in the corner, yellow and thick, dotted with cumin seeds and a splash of mustard oil. A tray of fried lotus stems, crisp, peppered, and somehow both earthy and floral, rests beside it. Lotus stems, by the way, are a bit of a local delicacy. Crunchy, hollow, delicately flavored. They're often harvested by hand from the shallows, using long poles with hooked ends. A process requiring both patience and, presumably, very tolerant knees. Historians still argue whether these lotus recipes came from ancient Buddhist monastics or developed independently from Persian cooking traditions, carried over by merchants and drifting cooks. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, tangled in the roots of trade and taste. As your aunt arranges the dishes on a wide metal tray, you grab the copper cups and fill them with cooled mint water from the clay jug beside the window. Each cup is etched with geometric designs that catch the flickering lamplight, turning water into something ceremonial. Dinner is not eaten at a table, not exactly. A large embroidered cloth is spread over the floor cushions, transforming the sitting room into a banquet space. Dishes are placed around in a loose circle, with spoons only present for show. Your hands, after all, are the true utensils here. Tools of both precision and poetry. Everyone gathers slowly. Your uncle arrives from a neighboring boat, bringing with him 2 tiny jars of pickled walnut and a joke about ghosts stealing his laundry pegs. He claims one pair of socks now belongs to a very shy spirit with cold feet. You begin with the lentils, spooned onto a mound of steaming rice, the mustard oil curling into the grains like liquid gold. The flavor is both bold and familiar, with the slow heat of black pepper building like an approving hum in your chest. The lotus stems are crisp, almost loud, and pair unexpectedly well with the pickled walnut, which tastes like the forest floor and old secrets. There is laughter, of course. Stories traded as freely as chutneys. A debate about whether the best mango pickle is made with mustard or fenugreek. An argument, gently spirited, about the correct texture for dried turnip curry. Someone offers to arm wrestle over it, but then promptly declines, citing full stomach lethargy. Through the open window, the stars have begun to appear. First one, then another, then a sudden rush of them like a dam breaking in the sky. Their reflections shimmer in the darkened lake, mingling with the bobbing lantern lights of passing boats. You lean back, belly full, head fogged with spice and warmth. Someone passes you a small bowl of fernie, saffron rice pudding chilled in a clay dish, garnished with chopped pistachio and a single silver leaf. It's soft, delicate, and tastes like bedtime. The bowl is cool in your hands, the silver leaf glinting like a sliver of moon. You eat slowly, savoring every spoonful, even as the conversation fades into the background hum of contentment. The sort of silence that isn't empty, but overflowing. Your cousin begins humming a tune, something low and repetitive, almost a lullaby. She's stacking bowls now, carefully licking the last bit of chutney from her fingers between each trip to the kitchen shelf. You help with the cleanup, of course, because that's part of the ritual, too. The dishes are rinsed in a tin basin on the back deck, using water scooped up from the lake and strained through a muslin cloth. You scrub slowly, listening to the way water swishes and slaps against ceramic and metal. It's hypnotic, really. You lose count of how many bowls pass through your hands. You dry them on a sun-bleached towel with the word Monday stitched across the edge, even though it is most definitely not Monday. And then at last it's done. The lamps are dimmed. The shutters are drawn. The family begins to spread the bedding. Cotton mattresses pulled from the corner shelves, unfolded onto the floor with care. Your bed sits beneath a carved window screen, through which the moonlight spills in soft patterns, painting lace across the floor. The pillow smells faintly of saffron and cedar. You lie back and pull the quilt up to your chin. The air is cooler now, just enough to make you curl your toes. Outside, a boat drifts past, its oars barely breaking the water. A dog barks once, somewhere distant, then goes silent. Inside, someone yawns. The world creaks into sleep. And you follow. The houseboat settles deeper into the water as everyone drifts into sleep. But you remain half awake, curled beneath the quilt with your eyes just open enough to catch moonlight filtering through the window screen. It paints shifting patterns on the floor, intricate shadows of carved walnut, flickering slightly as the boat sways in the dark. You listen to the hush of the lake, to the gentle moan of the wood, to the night murmurs of a boat that has lived more lives than any person ever could. Even the water changes character after sunset. What was playful and rippling by day becomes something slower, heavier, like it too has curled up under a blanket and doesn't want to be disturbed. The occasional plop of a fish breaks the surface, then is gone. A faint breeze stirs the reeds along the far bank, and somewhere a loon lets out one lonely note. You shift onto your side and stare at the ceiling, tracing the painted vines that seem to grow across the beams. One of them winds toward the shape of a crescent moon, brushed in faded silver leaf. You wonder who painted it, and whether they had to lie on their back like this too, holding a brush in the air while their arms went numb. Historians still argue whether these interior motifs had symbolic meaning or were purely decorative, an artisan's signature left in flowers and skies. Some believe they mirrored the Persian miniatures brought in by royal patrons. Others think the designs simply reflect the natural world, lovingly observed by people who lived so closely with it they could draw a water lily from memory. Your grandmother used to claim the painted ceiling dreams for you, that if you fall asleep staring at it, it whispers your wishes to the wind. You're not sure if that's true, but you stare at it anyway. A creak down the hallway makes you sit up slightly. Just your cousin returning from a midnight trip to the copper basin in the washroom, stepping as quietly as someone with cold feet can. She glances your way and mouths, "You still awake?" You nod. She points to the kitchen shelf, then tiptoes over and returns with 2 pieces of leftover bread wrapped in linen. She tosses one to your bed. Midnight snack, of course. You chew slowly, careful not to let crumbs drop between the floorboards. The bread is cold now, but still soft, and faintly tastes of wood smoke and mustard oil. You imagine your stomach smiling in the dark. Your cousin settles back into her bedding with a contented sigh. A minute later, she mutters, "Do you think the floating tailor ever fixed his pants?" You reply, "Only in his dreams." She says, "Lucky pants." You both laugh softly into the night. The quiet resumes, and this time, it stretches wider. You close your eyes again, and the houseboat seems to rock just a bit more deliberately now, like it's trying to help you along. Then something changes, a soft thump outside, a rhythmic splash. You sit up, more curious than alarmed, and part the wooden screen to look out. In the moonlight, a small figure is paddling past in a narrow boat. An old man hunched over a lantern, its glow casting a pool of gold onto the water. He's tossing tiny paper boats into the lake, each one folded carefully, each one carrying a sliver of something. Leaves, flowers, maybe little scraps of cloth. Your breath catches. You've heard of this, the night offering, a fringe tradition, not widely practiced anymore. Some say it came from local healers, others from traveling mystics. The idea is simple but strange. Write your worry on a slip of paper, fold it into a boat, and send it out under the moon. The lake, apparently, knows what to do with it. You watch as 3 more boats float away behind him, trailing a line of wishes into the dark. He doesn't notice you watching. He just paddles on, slow and methodical, whispering something you can't quite hear. And then, like a dream, he's gone. Vanished around the bend, lantern flickering out behind a curtain of hanging willows. You sit in the dark, heart beating quietly, not sure what to feel. The idea of writing your worry down and letting it go into water feels oddly appealing. You fish around on the side shelf for a scrap of reed paper, then hesitate. What would you even write? You think for a moment, then you scribble. I worry that I'll forget this. You fold the paper slowly into the shape of a boat, clumsy but sincere, and tiptoe out onto the deck in bare feet. The wood is cool under your soles. You kneel, lean out over the edge, and place your little worry boat gently into the lake. It floats, then it begins to drift. Carried by the same quiet current that has rocked you all day, it slips away, turning in the moonlight, then dissolving into the shadows beyond the hull. You sit there a while, legs dangling over the water, the breeze playing gently with your sleeves. Behind you, the houseboat breathes. So you breathe too, and eventually, finally, you lie back down beneath the painted moon, the quilt pulled high, your head full of bread and lotus stems and lavender and paper boats, and sleep takes you. The next morning arrives not with alarm bells or crowing roosters, but with the gentle sound of fabric being flapped briskly against wood. A rhythmic whap, whap, whap that could easily be mistaken for a drummer in deep meditation, or someone taking out their feelings on a stubborn bedsheet. You squint toward the window. Soft gray light filters in through the carved wooden screen, and just beyond it, you see your aunt on the back deck, expertly slapping a damp cotton quilt against the rail. Each strike sends out tiny puffs of water and an audible message. The day has started. Join us or remain a soggy disappointment. You stretch slowly beneath your quilt, listening as the houseboat hums back to life. The creaks return, one by one. A spoon stirs. A kettle squeals softly. A sneeze from the next room prompts a string of sleepy blessings. The air smells like cinnamon and cardamom and damp cedar, a cozy combination that makes your stomach mumble something about breakfast. You rise, pad across the woven rugs, and peek out onto the water. The lake is wrapped in mist. Not a heavy fog, but something finer, like gauze stretched across the surface. It gives the whole world a dreamlike softness, where each houseboat seems to float through clouds instead of water. You find your cousin in the kitchen, hunched over a shallow clay pan where dough bubbles over hot ghee. She flips it with a practiced flick of the wrist, then gestures with her chin to the tray behind her. "Sweet Rotus," she whispers. Don't say I never did anything for you. On the tray, flaky flatbreads sprinkled with jaggery and fennel, still glistening from their last dance with butter. You grab one reverently and take a bite. It's crisp on the edges, soft inside, and just sweet enough to feel like dessert pretending to be breakfast. Outside, the fabric flapping continues. Auntie has now moved on to the muslin pillowcases, occasionally pausing to inspect them like a jeweler grading diamonds. She spots you through the screen. Don't loiter, the fish vendor is coming. You sigh. Here, fish vendor is less a person and more a moment. A brief window of opportunity, often unpredictable, where fresh catch appears via boat, silver-scaled, slippery, and sold with swift negotiation. You hurry to grab the copper bowl, the universal sign of a serious customer, and step outside just in time to see him paddling toward you. The fish vendor is a wiry man in a wool vest, with the expression of someone who's seen far too many morning people. His boat is piled with baskets, carp, trout, the occasional catfish, and one suspiciously grumpy-looking eel. You crouch beside your aunt as she begins the haggling ballet. It's half math, half performance art. 4 for 3? 3 for 5. That one's missing an eye. He blinked. In the end, you walk away with 3 hefty trout, a bonus scoop of lake snails, and, somehow, a promise to lend your aunt's pickling recipe to the vendor's sister. As you rinse the fish in a tin basin, your cousin wanders over holding a tin of powdered turmeric. You ever wonder who first thought, you know what this lake needs? Spices? You shrug. Probably the same person who decided to put chili in yogurt. Brave soul. The fish are laid out to dry briefly while the kitchen is prepared for the mid-morning meal. You're not quite sure if this counts as second breakfast or first lunch, but you're too hungry to care. While you wait, you take a slow walk around the perimeter of the boat. The planks beneath your feet are warm now, the mist lifting just enough to reveal the other houseboats like sleepy neighbors emerging from behind lace curtains. You see someone beating a rug with more enthusiasm than necessary. Another brushing their hair into the lake, where the strands are quickly claimed by small fish. You stop at the side railing where sprigs of fresh mint grow in old brass pots. The scent is sharp and bright, a contrast to the sleepy pace of the morning. Next to the mint, you notice something new, a folded bit of reed paper wedged beneath a pebble. Curious, you pick it up. It's a note. Not addressed, no signature, just a sentence, written in a small, careful hand. The moon last night was floating too. You smile. It's either from your cousin, or from the paper boatman, or possibly the ghost with cold feet who now owns your uncle's socks. In any case, it feels like a gift. You tuck the note into your sleeve and head back inside, where the scent of coriander and roasting rice greets you like a familiar friend. Your aunt is already frying the fish, the spices singing as they hit the oil. Turmeric, fennel, crushed mustard seeds. The air fills with a warmth that sticks to the walls and makes your mouth water. The meal is simple, but perfect. Pan-fried trout with mustard, spiced potatoes, and rice scented with cloves and bay leaf. You sit cross-legged on the woven mat again, passing bowls back and forth, fingers oily and unbothered. The conversation drifts, lazy as the lake outside. Someone mentions that a neighbor is building a second deck onto their boat. Someone else claims to have spotted a heron stealing pickles from a market barge. And someone, your uncle most likely, starts composing a spontaneous song about fish with commitment issues. You eat until your stomach hums with gratitude. Then you lie back again, right where you are, arms folded behind your head. Outside, the sun peeks through the mist at last, glinting off the water in narrow bands of light that creep through the windows and warm the floor. Inside, someone snores gently. You listen, and breathe, and let your eyes drift closed once more. Because here, even wakefulness feels like dreaming. When you wake again, it's with the sluggish satisfaction of someone who has eaten, napped, and been gently rocked by a floating wooden home, like a very well-fed baby goat. The houseboat creaks beneath you in a familiar way. Less like a warning, and more like a yawn. You sit up slowly, brushing off a few sesame seeds that have mysteriously migrated onto your sleeve during your mid-morning snooze. Sunlight now spills through the window in bright shafts, painting the floor in rectangles of gold. The mist has cleared entirely, and the lake glistens like someone polished it with a silk cloth. You slip on your embroidered slippers and wander out to the deck. Across the water, other houseboats are alive with activity. Laundry flaps cheerfully from lines strung between carved columns. Children chase each other with wooden spoons. A boat covered entirely in potted basil floats past, manned by a very focused old woman counting her herbs aloud. Back on your own deck, your cousin is trimming reeds. Not for decoration. This is broom-making hour. Yes, we could buy one, she says, not looking up. But where's the fun in that? You sit beside her, watching as she selects the longest reeds and binds them tightly with jute string. Her fingers move fast, the way people's hands do when their mind is somewhere else, probably debating whether to name the broom or embroider its handle. You want to try? You absolutely do not, but you take a small bunch anyway and attempt to mimic her technique. Your reeds come out lopsided, vaguely resembling a squid with performance anxiety. She gently pats your hand and says, "We'll call it the emergency broom." Your aunt calls from the back of the houseboat, where she's fanning a small smoking pan of dried rosemary and cedar chips. "Sweep before you smoke," she reminds. Here, cleaning isn't just about tidying, it's ritual, a reset, a small, deliberate act to clear space, not just physically, but mentally, and apparently, cosmically. You take your emergency broom and begin sweeping the wooden floor, starting with the corners where dust and flower petals have collected like sleepy secrets. The scent of cedar smoke soon follows, curling around your ankles, wafting under the chairs, seeping into the woven curtains. It smells like old forests and fresh beginnings. Historians still argue whether these smoke rituals originated from Buddhist monastic routines, ancient Kashmiri folk practice, or were simply born out of necessity during mosquito season. But whatever their origin, they remain soothing, calming in the way that only traditions with no rush and no end can be. As the air clears, so does your head. You pause to watch a dragonfly land on the broom's handle. Its wings shimmer, catching the light like spun sugar. It stays just long enough to feel like a blessing. After the smoke wafts through every room and the floors are dust-free, the boat feels lighter, like it's taken a long, cleansing breath. You flop down onto the woven mat and sigh. Your cousin joins you with 2 small clay cups filled with salted lassi. Cool, tangy, and just sharp enough to jolt your taste buds back into service. You sip slowly, savoring the contrast of chilled yogurt against the midday sun creeping in. Then your cousin stands and announces, "Time for the floating market." The phrase alone gives you a tiny thrill. You follow her out, hopping into the small canoe tied alongside your houseboat. The oars are carved with sunburst patterns, and the cushions smell faintly of camphor. You each take a paddle, though your cousin does most of the steering. Her strokes precise and practiced, while yours are slightly more decorative. You glide across the lake, weaving between other small boats. Some are selling fruit, bright apricots, lumpy plums, long yellow bananas. Others carry crates of hand-dyed cloth, baskets of dried morels, even copper jewelry that catches the sunlight in slow, blinding pulses. You pass a spice boat manned by a man with a beard so majestic it has its own shadow. He scoops cumin into paper packets with a tiny carved ladle. Next to him, a boat sells only paper, scrolls, journals, folded fans, and one mysteriously labeled "For letters you'll never send." You point. Your cousin nods solemnly. That's where Auntie gets her mood journals. You drift lazily along the market's path, stopping here and there to buy a handful of saffron threads, a bundle of dried rose petals, and, at your cousin's insistence, a tin of gooseberry candy shaped like tiny turtles. The best part? No bargaining. Everyone here knows each other. Prices are spoken softly, sometimes with a smile and a nod, sometimes with a joke about someone's cooking. One boat floats by playing music, a small sitar and a harmonium, the notes rolling across the water like mist made of sound. You close your eyes, letting the melody settle into your bones. Even your cousin stops paddling for a moment, head tilted, caught in the same spell. Historians still argue whether floating markets on the Dal Lake were an organic development or a deliberate innovation introduced during the Mughal period. Some even claim they evolved from old Buddhist pilgrimage supply routes, slowly transformed into communal bazaars. But no matter their origin, today they feel timeless. Eventually, with your boat gently weighed down by saffron, paper, and regretfully few turtle candies, you turn back toward home. The water ripples beneath you in calm, contented sighs. Even the ducks seem slower now, full from stolen apricots and possibly philosophical after the harmonium performance. As you approach the houseboat, your aunt is waiting, sitting cross-legged with a sewing basket. She nods at your bounty. Did you get turmeric? Your cousin blinks. You hold up the candy tin and offer, but we got turtles. Auntie sighs like someone resigned to a life of improvisation and candy-based curry. You climb back onto the boat and unload your treasures. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, casting soft gold across the fabric still drying on the line. The scent of saffron lingers in the air, mixed with lake water, lavender, and the warm cedar still clinging to the floor. You sit back with a piece of turtle candy melting on your tongue and think, not for the first time, that maybe nothing extraordinary happened today. And that makes it perfect. The candy dissolves slowly, leaving behind a tart sweet trace of gooseberry and a faint crunch of sugar crystals that lodge in your molars like stubborn guests who don't know when to leave. You lean back against a carved post and sigh. Not out of fatigue, but that specific kind of sigh reserved for long afternoons where nothing is urgent, and even the breeze seems to hesitate. The houseboat rocks gently beneath you, its movements so familiar now that you barely notice them unless you concentrate. Which you don't, because thinking too hard would break the spell. Your cousin is stringing the dried rose petals you bought into garlands, tying them with bright red thread. She hums an off-key tune that may or may not be about goats. What's the garland for? You ask. She shrugs. Mood enhancement. Fair enough. You take one and drape it around your neck. The petals are dry but still fragrant, holding on to their scent like stubborn old ladies with perfectly folded handkerchiefs. You feel instantly more dramatic, like someone who writes letters with a feather quill and sighs before answering questions. Down the hallway, your uncle begins tuning a sitar. It's that time again, your cousin whispers. You glance at the small wall clock with its gently ticking hand and faded brass frame. 3 o'clock. Tea hour. Now, tea in this houseboat isn't a beverage. It's a performance, a ritual, an excuse for snacks, and a reason to sit still. Noon tea is strong and brisk. Evening tea is light and sweet. But afternoon tea, the one you're about to have, is the real star of the show. Your aunt has already begun the preparations. Saffron, green cardamom, cinnamon, and a pinch of baking soda are brewing in a copper pot over a tiny flame. Kashmiri noon chai, also known as pink tea. It's not actually sweet, not until you add crushed almonds and a sugar cube the size of a dice to each cup. The color turns from deep green to dusty rose, thanks to the soda and the long, slow simmering. It's the kind of chemistry lesson that smells incredible and leaves you slightly more awake than you'd planned. You carry the tray of tea out onto the deck, careful not to spill any of the precious pink brew. Alongside it, biscuits so fragile they crumble under the weight of a glance, a dish of candied melon and fried semolina fritters that look like golden pebbles and taste like crunchy daydreams. As you sip, your uncle begins to play. Just slow notes, plucked one at a time, rolling into the air like smoke rings. No audience, no fanfare. Just strings and lake breeze and the quiet percussion of biscuit crumbs landing in laps. "Do you think the lake ever gets bored of us?" your cousin asks between sips. "Never," you reply. "We provide excellent entertainment." She considers this, nods, and tucks a second sugar cube into her tea like she's rewarding herself for a profound philosophical contribution. The sitar melody changes. Something older, slower. A tune passed down, like a secret told only at dusk. Your aunt closes her eyes while she sips, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the side of her cup. Historians still argue whether these musical traditions trace directly back to the Sufi gatherings that once took place on floating pavilions in the Mughal period, or whether they evolved more recently, an accidental blend of folk memory and lake acoustics. Some even claim that certain ragas sound better over water, where the notes stretch farther before dissolving into the horizon. You believe it. You've never heard silence listen so intently. As the tea cools and the plates empty, the music fades too. Your uncle stops mid-phrase, lays the sitar across his knees, and sighs contentedly. Not to end the concert, but because no moment lasts forever, not even the good ones. That's when the rain starts. Not a storm, just a soft drizzle, as if the sky is sprinkling a little perfume over everything before dinner. You hear it first on the roof, the papery whisper of water against wood, then the plink of droplets into the brass pots left outside to collect them. Each drop feels deliberate, spaced just so. You remain on the deck, too comfortable to run inside. Your cousin fetches a woolen shawl and drapes it around your shoulders. The garland of rose petals still hangs from your neck, now catching a few drops of rain like a drying bouquet left on a doorstep. The lake ripples gently beneath the downpour, each circle of water flickering silver and vanishing before the next begins. You feel like you're sitting inside a painting, one of those delicate watercolors with almost too much sky and not quite enough explanation. Across the lake, other houseboats begin lighting their lamps early, their reflections glowing softly in the dimming afternoon. Someone shouts cheerfully in Kashmiri from a rooftop, and a laugh follows. A little boy paddles by in a washtub, holding an umbrella far too big for him. He grins like he's the captain of the universe. The rain smells clean, earthy, slightly metallic. It mixes with the lingering scents of tea and cardamom and whatever incense your aunt lit when you weren't looking. You let your fingers dangle over the side of the deck, brushing the rainwater pooling in the grooves of the railing. The drops are cold, your skin tingles. But you don't pull away. There's no hurry. Eventually the rain begins to slow, and the sky splits open with a single beam of light, so golden it looks edible. You glance at your cousin, who is already searching the sky with her eyes. "There," she whispers, and sure enough, a pale rainbow stretches out across the horizon. Not a full arc, just a sliver, like the lake's secret smile. You both sit in silence, watching it fade. A single teacup remains on the tray beside you, half full, still warm. You raise it. To the lake, to the rain, to pink tea and squid brooms and anonymous poems stuck under pebbles. You sip and sigh, and let the houseboat rock you gently like always. The rainbow fades, as rainbows always do. Too fast, too softly, leaving you wondering whether it was ever really there or just a brief hallucination brought on by excessive tea consumption and the hypnotic rhythm of raindrops. But the lake remains, unchanged and vast, its surface now shimmering with the reflections of early evening lamps. You gather the tray of cups and half-eaten snacks, balancing it carefully as you walk back inside. The interior of the houseboat is bathed in that gentle, in-between light, what your aunt calls lantern time. Not quite dusk, not quite night. Just enough glow to make the brass knobs gleam, and the embroidered curtains look like they're whispering secrets. Your cousin has already lit the small oil lamp in the hallway. It flickers behind a carved lattice screen, casting shifting shadows that look like the ghosts of trees swaying in slow motion. You set the tray down in the kitchen and catch sight of your reflection in the tin water pot. Hair tousled, cheeks pink from the tea and the breeze, a single rose petal still stuck to your collarbone, like a souvenir from some delicate dream. "Keep it," your cousin says from the doorway. "You've been officially garlanded." You smile, pocket the petal, and wander toward the small sitting room where your uncle is now rearranging a basket of walnuts like it's an art installation. He looks up. "Feeling ready?" "For what?" you ask. He taps the walnut basket. "Chess." The eternal game. Here, chess isn't just a game. It's an evening ritual second only to storytelling and, arguably, pickling. A battered wooden board is retrieved from under a cupboard, and the pieces, hand-carved from walnut wood, are unwrapped from a flannel cloth. Each one is slightly asymmetrical, worn smooth from generations of battles both brilliant and questionable. You take your place on the floor across from him. Your cousin perches nearby with a bowl of salted lotus seeds, munching loudly and offering unsolicited commentary. The first move is always the same. You push a pawn forward 2 spaces, and your uncle narrows his eyes like you've insulted his goat. "Game on!" As the match unfolds, you become more aware of the room's quiet sounds. The low crackle of the oil lamp, the soft hiss of something simmering on the kitchen stove. Probably lentils, possibly magic. A distant plunk as another houseboat tosses its dishwater into the lake. You try to focus on the game, but your mind wanders. You remember the note from earlier, the one folded under the mint pot. The moon last night was floating too. You wonder who else is writing things and tucking them into odd corners of this floating village. Is it a game, a habit, or a way to keep from forgetting the quiet things? Historians still argue whether Kashmiri chess traditions stemmed directly from ancient Indian chaturanga, or whether regional variations evolved independently in mountain valleys, influenced by Persian travelers and Buddhist monastic pastimes. What is agreed upon, however, is that playing a defensive rook game while distracted by lotus seeds is nearly impossible. You lose, but gracefully. Your uncle bows dramatically, as if he's won the final battle of a decades-long campaign, then spoils it by slipping a walnut into his tea like it's a normal thing to do. "Adds depth," he says. You both ignore him. As the game is packed away, the rest of the household shifts into what can only be described as quiet fidgeting. Pillows are fluffed, curtains are straightened, sandals are realigned. All this, of course, is a prelude to evening storytelling hour. You barely sit down before your aunt arrives with a shawl over her shoulders and a look of solemn anticipation. "Tonight," she begins, "we revisit the tale of the moon thief merchant." You settle in. The houseboat darkens a little more. Only the oil lamp and a small string of copper fairy lights illuminate the room now, casting everything in a soft amber glow. Your aunt's voice drops into the sing-song cadence that only appears during stories. She weaves the tale of a traveling merchant who fell in love with the moon and tried to buy it with 3 sacks of saffron and a boat made of pearls. The moon, amused but unimpressed, refused. So the merchant plotted to steal it, hiding it in his pocket, which made him glow for the rest of his life and unable to sneak anywhere ever again. It's ridiculous, of course, but it's also perfect, and it comes with details, like how the merchant's wife made fish pickle by moonlight, or how his slippers squeaked only when he lied. Details that feel like memories you forgot you had. Your cousin chimes in now and then, correcting or enhancing parts of the story. No, the moon didn't vanish. It got offended and turned into a mirror. The tale winds on, gentle and meandering. You find yourself swaying a little to the rhythm of it. The oil lamp flickers in time with your aunt's voice. Even your uncle falls quiet, though you suspect he's now composing an epic poem about walnuts in his head. Eventually the tale drifts to a sleepy end. The merchant becomes a star. The moon becomes a boat. The lake reflects both. Silence. But it's the warm, full silence of a story that has landed exactly where it should. You stretch, yawn, and glance towards the tiny hallway window. Outside, the moon is rising. Not quite full, but fat and smug, sitting low over the lake as if listening in. You nudge your cousin. Think it remembers the merchant? She grins. Probably stole his slippers. The laughter is soft, shared, fading quickly into a long, comfortable quiet. You sit there for a while longer, watching the moonlight shift across the carved walls, casting shadows that look suspiciously like boats made of pearls. And in the hush of that moment, rocked ever so slightly by the water beneath you, you feel like the story hasn't ended. It's just paused, waiting for someone to turn the page. The moonlight slides across the floorboards now, inching its way forward like a particularly shy cat making its nighttime rounds. It catches the edge of the brass door frame, the rim of a teacup someone forgot to clean, the tiny spoon carved from walnut wood that still rests on the chessboard like it's contemplating a strategic move of its own. You're still seated, wrapped in your shawl, listening to the water slosh quietly beneath you. The houseboat creaks again. This time not from movement, but from cooling. You've learned by now that wood, like people, has its own ways of exhaling at the end of the day. The family has started to disperse. Your aunt retires to her room, muttering something about dreams and the wrong socks. Your uncle trails after her, composing a new song about misplaced footwear. Your cousin lingers just long enough to light one last stick of camphor incense, then disappears with a yawn and a mysterious armful of pickled turnips. And then it's just you. You shift slightly. Gaze up at the beams overhead. The ceiling is carved with lattice patterns, casting delicate moon shadow lacework down onto the floor. You trace the shapes with your eyes until they blur at the edges. It's peaceful and a little surreal, like living inside a carved jewelry box that floats. You decide it's time to stretch your legs. Stepping onto the deck, you find the lake transformed again. What was lively and shimmering just hours ago is now glass still. The sky has taken over the surface, reflecting stars so precisely that it feels like you could fall upward if you tripped. You clutch the railing instinctively, half amused by your own sleepy vertigo. A single boat passes by, its lantern glowing like a slow-moving firefly. You recognize it. It's the floating baker, a man who delivers sweetbreads and sesame-crusted flatbreads in the early morning, but also rows late at night when he can't sleep. He hums to himself in a low baritone that sounds like the boat is singing. You wave. He nods, then keeps rowing. Somewhere farther out, a bird chirps once, confused by the moonlight probably, and then falls silent again. The lake, this deep into the night, becomes a world unto itself. There's no land in sight from where you stand, only the silhouettes of other boats, quiet and lamp-lit, dotting the water like floating dreams. Historians still argue whether this houseboat tradition began under Akbar's rule, or whether it evolved as a creative workaround when certain groups were barred from land ownership during British colonial policy. What's clear is that the practice of turning floating structures into homes, shops, gardens, even schools, is uniquely Kashmiri and utterly ingenious. You pull your shawl tighter around you and think, what would it be like to grow up here and never live on land at all? To mark seasons not by dry leaves or snowfall, but by the angle of the moon on the water, or the day the fish start jumping again, or when the mint begins to bolt in its little brass pot by the stairs. It's a life measured not by calendars, but by rhythm, by creak and splash and kettle whistle. You take a slow lap around the outer edge of the boat. A basket of pomegranates sits by the kitchen window, left out to catch the cool night air. One has cracked open slightly, revealing glossy red seeds inside like rubies under pressure. You pluck one, bite down, and the taste is a sharp, tart explosion, bright enough to wake the sleep right out of your bones. You find a stool and sit there, chewing slowly, watching the stars. Somewhere behind you, a wind chime begins to tinkle faintly. Just 5 notes, barely enough for a lullaby. The moon hangs higher now. Not perfectly round, but full enough to command the water's attention. Its light wraps around the houseboat like gauze, making everything look gentler, older, more forgiving. You think about the merchant from your aunt's story, the one who tried to buy the moon with saffron and pearls. You wonder what else he would have tried. A jar of walnut pickles? A song sung at the right hour? Or maybe, just maybe, a quiet boat, a hot cup of pink tea, and a promise to keep the moon company when the sky gets too crowded. Back inside, the houseboat breathes deeply in its sleep. The wood sighs. A rug flutters faintly in the draft. Somewhere, impossibly, someone is snoring with the rhythm of a metronome. Steady, nasal, and oddly comforting. You sit there until your teacup hands start to feel the chill. Then you rise and return inside, tiptoeing down the narrow hallway, passing the carved niches and stacked wool blankets, the dusty books with pressed flowers inside them, and the basket of shoes no one has organized in a century. You duck into the washroom to rinse your face. The basin is metal, chilled from the open window beside it. You splash cold water over your skin and blink at your reflection in the tiny mirror. The shawl makes you look like a character in one of your aunt's stories. The moon thief's niece, perhaps, who trades gossip for rose petals and never folds her socks correctly. You smile, dry your face, and head for your room. Your quilt is still warm. The windows are cracked just slightly, letting in the scent of the lake and the faint hum of someone still cooking far away. You climb beneath the blanket, shifting until the houseboat's rocking becomes part of your breath. In, sway, out, creak, in, sway. As you close your eyes, you can just barely hear the water tapping against the hull, the wind rustling through the hanging rugs outside, and the last lingering notes of your uncle's sitar, still echoing, perhaps, in the wood itself. And the moon, though you can't see it now, is still watching, still floating, still waiting to be stolen. Sleep doesn't come immediately, not because you're restless, but because the air feels too perfectly still to disturb. You lie there in the soft hush of the houseboat, listening to it murmur to itself. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, the lake laps lazily at the wooden hull, like a cat cleaning its paws before bed. The silence isn't total. It's made up of dozens of tiny, sleeping noises. The creak of a cabinet adjusting to cooler air, a faint chirrup from the single night cricket, who didn't get the memo that crickets should live on land, and the far-off rhythmic tapping of someone winding a watch by lamplight. You slip out of bed again, not for any particular reason, just because you can. The houseboat at night is a different place entirely. Quieter, yes, but also more magical. Like a storybook you've read 1,000 times that still manages to surprise you on the last page. You pad barefoot down the hallway, the rug soft under your feet. The walls are lined with hanging tapestries, stitched with traditional Kashmiri chain stitch embroidery. Paisleys, chinar leaves, geometric patterns that swirl and knot together like thoughts you forgot you had. You run your hand along one as you pass, tracing a flower that looks suspiciously like a spinning wheel. In the kitchen, the fire in the little clay stove has been banked for the night. A pot of lentils still rests beside it, covered with a muslin cloth weighed down by a walnut shell. Your aunt's signature method. "Even dreams taste better when they've been slow-cooked," she once said. You don't doubt it. You pour yourself a glass of boiled water from the brass jug and sip it slowly, leaning against the windowsill. Outside, the lake is ink black, broken only by tiny specks of gold where oil lamps still burn on distant houseboats. The stars above are scattered like spilled flour across a dark tabletop. You think of the floating baker again. Is he still out there, rowing past sleeping lilies, composing secret bread poems in his head? Historians still argue whether these late-night boaters, bread sellers, milk deliverers, even floating musicians, were part of a formal network, or whether they emerged as part of a spontaneous, fluid economy that adjusted with the seasons. Either way, their presence gives the night a quiet sense of movement, a heartbeat beneath the stillness. You finish your water and tuck yourself back into bed. The mattress sinks slightly under you, as it always does, and the houseboat gives a polite groan in response, like it's settling in with you. This time, sleep arrives like an old friend slipping into the seat beside you. You dream of things that don't quite make sense in the morning. Climbing a staircase made of lotus petals, your uncle's sitar turning into a goose, your cousin arguing with a talking jar of pickles about moonlight etiquette. You wake to silence again. Not morning silence. Pre-morning silence. The hour before dawn, when even birds think it's a bit too early, and the lake, for once, holds its breath. You rise quietly, dress in layers to ward off the chill, and step onto the deck. The air is cool and damp, tinged with the scent of wet wood and faint traces of last night's camphor. A pale mist hovers over the water, cloaking everything in mystery. Even the nearby houseboats look half erased, like sketches not yet filled in. And there, gliding silently across the lake, is the floating temple boat. You've heard of it, of course. It doesn't appear every morning. Some say it follows its own schedule, unbothered by clocks or calendars. Others believe it only emerges when the moon stays out late and forgets to set. It's not a temple in the traditional sense. No priests, no ceremonies. Just a small wooden boat covered in faded silk flags and marigold garlands, with an old woman seated cross-legged at its center, humming softly and casting flower petals into the water. No one speaks to her. No one interrupts. She makes her slow rounds, trailing a ribbon of color and incense behind her. You watch from the shadows of your deck, holding your breath without realizing it, and wonder what she's praying for. Rain? Fish? Fewer debates about turmeric quantities? The boat passes. Her eyes meet yours for a flicker of a second, and she nods once. That's all? You stay out long after she's gone, watching the petals float in her wake. A few drift close enough to your houseboat to catch. You reach down, scoop one from the water, and lay it on the railing. It's still fragrant, slightly crumpled, like a petal that's heard too many secrets and can't be bothered to act surprised anymore. Inside, your cousin is up, also drawn by the pre-dawn silence. She carries 2 cups of salty butter tea, thick and steaming, and hands one to you with a sleepy smile. "This tea only tastes good before sunrise," she says, sitting beside you. You sip. It's rich, slightly oily, and comfortingly strange. A flavor that doesn't try to charm you. It just insists on being itself. You both sit there for a long time, watching the mist shift and thin. Birds begin to stir. A soft cough echoes from a distant boat. Someone shakes a carpet. Life, slowly, begins again. "I had a dream the moon was sinking," your cousin says. "Was it drowning?" She shakes her head. "No, just hiding." You nod. That sounds about right. As the first true light of morning edges over the hills, you feel the lake stretch beneath you, like it's waking too. The houseboat creaks gently. Somewhere inside, a spoon clinks against a pot. The smell of simmering rice drifts toward you, spiced with cumin, and quiet contentment. And just like that, another day begins. You've seen the whole cycle now. From golden dusk to silvery night to this soft, pearl-toned morning. And still, you can't quite tell where one part ends and another begins, which is exactly how it should be. You stay out on the deck longer than you mean to, letting the sun gently sneak up on you. It doesn't rise dramatically here, not like in stories where the sky turns gold all at once and angels burst into song. No, the sunrise in Kashmir is a long exhale. It begins at the edges, soaking the mist in soft light until everything looks like it's been dusted with ground almonds. The water changes too, from pewter to pearl to a kind of quiet blue that doesn't have a name, but makes you feel like you've finally remembered something you didn't know you'd forgotten. Ducks paddle by in pairs, heads bobbing, leaving V-shaped trails in the mirror-smooth lake. Their timing is impeccable, as if they've been briefed by a very efficient waterfowl director. Inside, the houseboat hums back to life. A cough. A drawer opens. A burst of laughter from your aunt, already scolding your uncle for some tea-related infraction. You turn to find your cousin now fully awake, brushing her hair with one of those wooden combs that look too beautiful to actually function. She's dressed in a loose firan, the traditional Kashmiri robe, with floral embroidery that seems to move slightly every time she does. You realize you've been staring at that robe hanging on a hook for days, wondering when it would make its grand debut. Turns out the answer is, right now. "You should wear one too," she says. You do. It's heavier than expected. Soft but substantial, like wearing a hug woven from wool and storytelling. You run your fingers along the sleeves, embroidered with saffron blossoms and stylized almonds. You look like you belong here now. At least a little. Breakfast is already underway. The kitchen fills with the smell of cumin, turmeric, and something being fried that promises to be at least mildly life-altering. Your aunt stands at the stove, flipping breads onto a cloth-lined basket. Lavasa flatbreads, puffed just right, slightly charred at the edges, warm enough to steam your glasses if you wore them. Next to the bread, a bowl of yogurt with chopped mint, some radishes so fresh they still squeak when sliced, and the house's unofficial champion, nadru, or lotus stem, stir-fried with spices until crisp on the outside and creamy inside. It's the sort of dish that shouldn't exist. Too complex for a vegetable. Too mysterious for a root. Too addictive to be legal. Everyone assembles slowly, like a play in which no one is ever late, just fashionably meandering. Plates are passed. Tea is poured. Opinions are shared. Softly, of course. It's too early for arguments, even about pickles. Your uncle insists that turnip pickle is superior to chili pickle. Your cousin glares at him like he just suggested banning blankets. You stay out of it and focus on your yogurt, which is now decorated with a perfect sprig of dill someone placed there like a crown. The sun climbs higher, cutting long lines across the tablecloth. Motes of dust dance through the beams like bored actors waiting for their cue. Someone opens a window. The breeze drifts in, smelling of water, sun-warmed wood, and whatever flower is currently blooming across the lake. "Today," your aunt says between bites, "we go to the floating gardens." You blink. "There are gardens?" "Oh yes," she says casually. "Islands, really. Ones that float." Your cousin grins. "Time to see the lake's secret pockets." An hour later, you're packed into a narrow wooden shikara. A boat so slim you're not entirely sure it doesn't double as a serving tray on weekends. Your uncle rows, his movements smooth and practiced. The paddle dips in and out of the water with barely a sound, sending you gliding forward through narrow reed channels, under wooden footbridges, and past small patches of water lilies that look surprised to see you. You pass a vendor in a boat stacked high with cucumbers. He whistles, offers you one for free. Your cousin accepts, and promptly begins carving it into a flute. "It won't play," she says, "but it'll look committed." The lake narrows here. Houseboats give way to simpler huts, floating sheds, and finally, there they are, the floating gardens. Technically, they're called rods. Islands built on interwoven layers of weed, mud, and reeds, topped with soil, then planted with vegetables and flowers. They look like they've drifted straight out of a storybook, or perhaps a slightly tipsy gardener's dream. Some are the size of small courtyards. Others are no bigger than a kitchen table. But each one bobs gently, anchored with wooden stakes, supporting life as if they've always belonged. You drift past tomatoes clinging to vines, squash curling like sleepy snakes, and rows of leafy greens so vibrant they practically glow. A farmer waves from one of the rods, a woven basket balanced on her hip, her feet bare and muddy. "Want to help harvest?" she calls. You do. The shikara nudges up beside one of the floating plots. You step gingerly onto the springy surface. It yields underfoot, spongy but sturdy. You half expect it to say something witty about your balance. You squat beside the farmer and begin picking beans. She hums an old folk tune and teaches you the rhythm. Pick, snap, drop, pick, snap, drop. It's oddly soothing. Historians still argue whether these gardens began as monsoon improvisations or intentional innovations born of land scarcity during the Mughal era. Either way, they represent a kind of quiet genius, a living, growing testament to adaptation. You finish with a basket full of beans and a heart strangely full too. Your cousin has somehow woven her cucumber flute into a garland now, which she drapes around your neck with mock solemnity. "Official garden initiate," she declares. You bow. The boat glides onward. You pass a tiny shrine on one of the rods. Just a small stone, a garland, and a diya flickering inside a glass jar. Someone left a sugar cube beside it, maybe as an offering, maybe just a snack. The lake widens again, and the houseboat comes back into view. You're home, floating, waiting. As you approach, the wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of roses and turmeric again. You step off the shikara, garland askew, hands still earthy from harvesting, and realize this floating rhythm, this drifting life of tea and stories and cucumber flutes, feels real now. Not like a vacation, but like something you could belong to. Back on the houseboat, you shed your cucumber garland and wash your hands in a copper basin, watching the silt swirl away into nothing. The lake air has that midday stillness to it now, the kind that feels like even the clouds are pausing to catch their breath. A heron stands stock still on a bamboo pole nearby, balancing with the dignity of someone who's spent a lifetime pretending not to notice their own reflection. Inside, your aunt is laying out lunch with the same precision usually reserved for weddings or art exhibitions. The table is low, the cushions plush, and the food a riot of colors and smells. There's dum aloo, potatoes slow-cooked in a yogurt gravy tinted orange-red with Kashmiri chili. There's spinach simmered with cubes of creamy paneer, and steaming rice dotted with whole spices that pop under your teeth like sleepy firecrackers. And then there's kewa, the famed saffron green tea, now steeping beside a tiny bowl of crushed almonds and dried rose petals. The tea is transparent gold, fragrant like a warm secret. You pour yourself a cup, and instantly the world seems to blur at the edges just a little. Not from exhaustion, from contentment. Your cousin raises her glass. To floating gardens and cucumber flutes. You toast, sip, and sigh at exactly the same time. I wonder if the rods ever argue, you muse. Like, hey, that was my tomato. Your uncle, already halfway through a stack of radish parathas, chuckles. That's why they float apart. Garden politics are no joke. Conversation drifts like incense smoke. Slow, fragrant, occasionally looping back on itself. You learn more about the lake, how the depth changes with the seasons, how some fish prefer classical music, how people here once measured time not by clocks, but by when the lotus bloomed. Historians still argue whether the ancient systems of timekeeping in Kashmir were based solely on astronomical observations or included agricultural and floral cues. One scholar insists a 14th century poem describes time cupped in a lotus leaf. No one's entirely sure what that means, but it sounds too pretty to question. Lunch ends the way all good things should, with someone loosening their belt and claiming they need a nap for digestion science. You agree, but instead of heading to your room, you wander out to the back deck, your new favorite spot. The lake has warmed just enough to ripple gently beneath the boat, and the air is filled with that mid-afternoon silence only found in places where people actually respect naps. You curl up on a cushion, eyes half-lidded, and pull a wool shawl over your legs. The scent of the saffron tea lingers on your breath. The houseboat creaks again, as if settling into a dream of its own. You doze, not deeply, not entirely, but enough to feel your mind drift through a series of soft images. A floating garden blinking at you sleepily, a heron reciting poetry, a walnut shell sailing across the lake like a proud little admiral. Somewhere in the haze, someone is whispering in a language you almost understand. You wake slowly, blinking into the warm amber light. The day has tilted again. The sun is beginning to slope toward the hills, and the wind has picked up ever so slightly, carrying with it the sound of distant singing. One of the boatmen, perhaps, rowing home with a tune. Your cousin appears beside you, holding a basket of paper scraps. "What's this?" you ask, stretching. "The poem game," she says. "House tradition." She shakes the basket. Each slip of paper contains a word. Some simple, some baffling, some possibly made up. Everyone draws 3. Then, using those 3 words, you write a short poem, or a riddle, or just a very dramatic grocery list. The point isn't brilliance, the point is surprise. You draw, once lantern, dois apricot, tris echo. Your cousin groans. "You got actual words." You smirk. "What did you get?" "Cricket," she says, as in the insect. "Also, socks and betrayal." You both burst out laughing. You take a minute, scribble down your impromptu poem on a torn edge of notebook paper. The lantern swung slow in the apricot dusk, and the echo of steps came softer than trust. Not every light leads you home, some just wait. You pass it to your cousin. She reads it, eyebrows lifted. "You've officially earned your room on the boat," she says. You ask to read hers. She holds it up like it's classified. The cricket wore socks, mismatched and cruel. He betrayed the whole garden and jumped in the pool. Moral, trust no one with loud feet. You both dissolve into laughter, startling a passing duck. The poetry game goes on until the sun kisses the edge of the hills and the sky turns mango and coral and peach, like it's been steeped in the same spices as your lunch. You realize you've spent the whole day in a kind of soft, waking dream, where the world unfolds gently, one petal at a time. And it's not over yet. As the sky darkens, your uncle brings out a small string instrument, a kind of rural lute, carved from walnut and strung with what looks suspiciously like fishing line. He begins to pluck out a tune. Not a full song, just fragments. Bits of sound, like memories that haven't decided what shape to take. You close your eyes and let the notes wrap around you. The houseboat sways, the water glimmers, and somewhere across the lake, a bell rings softly. Not a warning, just a reminder. You're still afloat. You stay on the deck as twilight deepens, wrapped in that now familiar shawl, the one that smells faintly of saffron and old books. Your uncle's quiet plucking has stopped, but the music still seems to hang in the air, echoing from the walls, the water, your own heartbeat. The lake has gone dusky again, reflecting the first stars. Lamps blink on across nearby houseboats, flickering like polite fireflies. One by one, neighbors begin lighting their DI. Small clay lamps fueled with mustard oil and fitted with short cotton wicks. Their soft glow spreads in halos, each one swaying slightly with the boat it belongs to. You notice how no one rushes. No one ever really does here. Your cousin brings you a slice of firni, a chilled rice pudding thickened with ground almonds and scented with cardamom. It's served in a small terracotta dish, the kind that makes everything taste slightly more magical. The top has been garnished with crushed pistachios and a single saffron strand that looks like it might get up and waltz away if the breeze picks up. She hands it to you and says, "We eat this when something has gone especially right." You take a bite. Cool, creamy, just the right hint of floral sweetness. "What's gone right?" you ask, mouth full. She shrugs. "You're still here. That's enough." After dessert, your aunt joins you on the deck, this time carrying a small tin box. She flips the lid and reveals an array of worn wooden stamps. Tiny blocks, each carved with different designs. Paisleys, sunbursts, tiny deer, a tea kettle, and one suspiciously similar to your uncle's mustache. "These are for printing on fabric," she says, selecting one and pressing it into your hand. "But sometimes we just press them into dough, or soap, or each other's arms if we're feeling dramatic." You choose one shaped like a cypress tree and stamp it gently into a patch of flour on the table. The design comes out perfectly. You stare at it like it's a fossil of a secret you haven't learned yet. "Do people still use these?" you ask. "Some do," she replies. "Some say they're outdated. Others say they're essential." Historians still argue whether block printing in Kashmir developed from Persian influences or indigenous folk traditions. I say it came from a mother who wanted her tablecloth to be less boring. You spend the next half hour stamping everything in sight. Napkins, the breadboard, your cousin's wrist. It becomes a quiet kind of meditation. Each stamp is a whisper of the past, a gentle rebellion against blankness. Eventually, the ink runs out, and the sky goes deep navy. Dinner is a quiet affair. Leftovers made new with a fresh hit of cumin and a side of pickled quince that's somehow both sour and affectionate. You eat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by laughter that doesn't try too hard and stories that don't always end. Later, everyone helps tidy up. Plates are rinsed with water scooped from the lake, then wiped dry with sun-bleached linen. The last of the incense is lit. The chime over the door is tied down so it doesn't tinkle all night. And slowly, the houseboat begins its bedtime routine. Your uncle wraps his lute in an old shawl. Your cousin braids her hair into 2 loose ropes and ties the ends with strips of dried hibiscus. Your aunt places a fresh sprig of mint in a shallow dish by the window. "To keep the dreams curious," she says, you retreat to your room, where your mattress has been fluffed, your blanket turned back, and your slippers tucked just so beneath the edge. The lamp beside the bed casts a soft, honey-colored glow over everything. Books, postcards, your now very smudged ink-stamped hand. You lie down, letting the bed rock with the motion of the water. It's such a different kind of tiredness. The good kind, the kind that settles into your bones like warm broth. You think about the day, the rods, the poetry game, the heron, still probably composing its memoir in haiku, and the floating temple boat, petals still drifting in its wake. You feel as if the lake has opened its arms just a little wider to make room for you. The sound of water lapping returns, rhythmic and sleepy. The wind nudges the curtains. Somewhere, a kettle whistles once and is answered by a duck. The lights across the lake blink out one by one, and your eyes begin to follow. It's hard to say what you feel exactly. Gratitude, maybe, or nostalgia for something you haven't finished living yet. But mostly you feel anchored, in the best possible way. As if even in a world made of floating wood and shifting shadows, you've found a place where your breath matches the water's rhythm, where your dreams are flavored with cumin and echoes, and where your presence is not just welcomed, but woven in. You close your eyes and think, quite simply, this is enough. Outside the lake sighs. Inside, the boat rocks you gently toward sleep. The night stretches on, but you don't notice time anymore. Sleep comes in soft waves, gentle and slow, like the rocking of the houseboat itself. You wake briefly once, just enough to notice the moon has shifted, a bit lower now, painting silver across the wooden floorboards. Then you drift off again, arms wrapped loosely around the wool blanket, your breath in time with the creaking lullaby of the boat's joints. When you next stir, it's still dark, but something in the air feels changed, a hush even deeper than before. You listen, eyes still closed, and realize it's snowing, very softly, tiny flakes whispering down from the black velvet sky, landing with the quietest of sighs on the deck outside. You can't hear the snow, not really, but you feel it, like a secret being passed around the lake in hushed tones. You rise, pulling on your thickest socks, and the firan your cousin left folded neatly at the foot of your bed. It smells of cedar and something faintly floral. You pad to the deck, stepping out into the first winter dusting. The entire world looks different now, as if it's been sifted through sugar and silk. The rooftops of the neighboring houseboats wear a fine crust of white. The reeds at the lake's edge are frosted at their tips, and every wooden surface glows faintly in the moonlight. It's not much snow, not yet. Just enough to make the air smell clean and crystalline, and your breath rise like steam from a forgotten kettle. Your cousin joins you after a few minutes, her cheeks pink from the cold, carrying 2 mugs of steaming kehwa. "I knew you'd be up," she says, handing you one. You take a sip, even hotter and sweeter than usual. Your hands tingle from the contrast of heat and cold. "Do you think it'll stick?" you ask. She tilts her head. "Maybe. Depends on the ducks." You glance at the lake. The ducks seem utterly unfazed. "You mean like a local saying?" you ask. "No," she says, deadpan. "Just that the ducks always know first." You watch them for a while, waddling across the shallows like fat little sages. Somewhere behind you, a shutter groans open, and your aunt appears with an old wool blanket, which she drapes around both your shoulders in a single motion practiced over decades. "The first snow is sacred," she murmurs. "It reminds the water it can still become something else." You don't respond. You just stand there, watching the slow, barely there snowfall and sipping tea that tastes like sunshine trapped in a spice box. Your uncle joins shortly after, sleep still clinging to his hair. He doesn't say anything, just nods, takes a long look at the lake, and disappears back inside, emerging minutes later with a carved walnut box. He opens it reverently and removes a small, handcrafted snow gauge, an ancient contraption involving a copper funnel and an engraved measuring stick. "This was my grandfather's," he explains, placing it on the railing. "He always measured the first snow, even if it didn't last. Said it kept us honest." You all watch the funnel, waiting for the first flake to fall inside. The anticipation feels ceremonial, holy even. Historians still argue whether snow rituals like these have deep historical roots or are simply local habits turned into tradition by force of memory, your uncle adds, almost as an afterthought. A flake lands, then another, tiny taps against the copper. You grin. Your cousin pulls her blanket tighter. "That's it. Winter's here. We should make walnut candy." And just like that, the spell breaks, gently, and a new plan begins to form. You all retreat to the warm kitchen, cheeks flushed, hands thawing. The kettle goes back on. The stove is stoked with fresh kindling. The air fills quickly with cinnamon, jaggery, and toasted walnut scent. Someone turns on an old radio that crackles out the faint notes of a ghazal sung decades ago. The candy isn't complicated, just caramelized sugar, nuts, a pinch of salt, but it requires constant stirring. Your cousin narrates the process like a cooking show host with a dramatic flair. "Now we wait for the moment of suspense," she says, "when sugar flirts with disaster and becomes destiny." You stir slowly, watching the mixture shift from amber to gold to that rich brown of stories best told beside a fire. Finally, it's poured into a flat brass tray and scored into little diamonds. "Let it cool," your aunt warns. "Impatience leads to burned tongues and tragic folk songs. You all eat warm slices anyway, laughing through your pain." Later, with sticky fingers and full bellies, you gather again in the main room, this time with extra shawls and a small brazier in the center. It glows gently, casting flickering shadows against the carved ceiling panels. The heat rises slow but steady, curling up your arms like a familiar lullaby. Your cousin reaches for her journal, filled with bits of poetry and half-remembered dreams. She tears out a blank page and hands it to you. "For your snow memory," she says. You write, "The lake sleeps and the snow sings. The night holds its breath, and I float." No one says anything, but your aunt gives your shoulder a soft squeeze. Your uncle raises his kewa. Your cousin places the journal page in a glass jar, caps it, and places it on the shelf. "A memory," she says. "Preserved. For the next snowfall." You smile. You sit together for a while longer, not doing much, just breathing, listening, watching the brazier flicker and the snow fall. And somehow, without realizing it, you fall asleep right there, wrapped in shawls, surrounded by family. Floating, drifting, dreaming of walnuts and snowflakes and ducks that know things before you do. You don't remember moving, but you wake up in your own bed. The brazier's warmth lingers in your skin, like the memory of a hug you didn't quite know you needed. Outside, the lake is blanketed in quiet. No ducks, no voices, just the sound of snow gently settling on snow, and the distant creak of another boat shifting with the cold. The morning is syrupy slow. You lie still for a while, the shawl pulled up to your chin, the scent of cedar still in your hair. The snow outside hasn't melted. It's thick now, proper snow, the kind that hushes the world and insists you pause. Your cousin knocks once before slipping in, balancing a tray with 2 cups of kewa and a tiny dish of candied quince. She's already dressed, layers upon layers of wool and silk, her cheeks pink with cold and a little sleep. "Still snowing," she says. You sit up, wrap yourself tighter in the blanket, and sip. The warmth spreads through your chest like a sunrise. You both say nothing for a while. You just sit there, side by side, staring out at the whitened lake, watching a crow hop delicately from one snow-dusted railing to another, like it's trying not to wake the water. Eventually you rise, dress slowly, and pad to the deck. It's a different world today. All the soft, shifting textures of the lake are now frozen into sculpture. The boats wear caps of snow. The lotus pods are crisp with frost. The mountains beyond are frosted like bakery cakes. Impossibly perfect, almost fake. You've never seen a stillness like this before. You step out carefully, mindful of ice patches. The cold bites at your ears, your nose, your fingers. But you don't mind. Somehow, it's exactly what you need. To feel this air. To remember where you are. To carry this moment back with you someday. Your uncle is already out there, scooping snow off the deck with a wooden paddle. He works slowly, methodically, not in a rush to finish. It's not about clearing the snow. It's about being with it. "We get 1 or 2 good snows like this each winter," he says. "Sometimes they melt. Sometimes they stay. Either way, the lake remembers." You nod, not entirely sure what that means. but liking the way it sounds. A phrase you can carry in your pocket and take out later, when the sky back home is dull and dry. Inside, breakfast is hearty and humble. Hot haq, a garlicky Kashmiri green served with rice, alongside flatbreads and fried monjagade that crunch in the most satisfying way. A thick walnut chutney appears, spicy and earthy, and your cousin warns you not to underestimate its strength. "The last guest cried halfway through and blamed the altitude," she says with a grin. You survive it. As dishes are cleared and the table wiped down, your aunt gestures to a cloth bag tucked into the corner. You hadn't noticed it before. She pulls it out and lays it on the table. Inside, a collection of dried herbs, each labeled in faded script, most in Kashmiri, a few in Urdu, some in English that doesn't quite get the translation right. "These are for when the snow keeps you in," she says. "When you can't go anywhere, not even to the end of the dock." She selects a few leaves, begins brewing a blend in a tiny clay pot. The smell is unusual, sharp, slightly peppery, with a sweet undercurrent like anise. "We call this sleep tea," she says. "It doesn't put you to sleep. It reminds you how." You sip it, and instantly your chest unclenches, as if your lungs have been holding on to a story, and the tea just gave them permission to let it go. Historians still argue whether traditional Kashmiri herbal blends like this one trace back to Greek medicine brought through ancient trade routes, or evolved from local mountain remedies whispered from grandmother to granddaughter. Either way, they work. Later that day, your cousin proposes one last outing. "Just to the edge of the lake," she says, "for goodbye's sake." You both bundle up, layer after layer, until you resemble polite, wool-wrapped onions. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you walk, slowly, not speaking much, just observing. You pass boats half buried in snow, fences turned into snowy ribs, a wooden pier glazed in frost. At the far edge, where the lake meets a low line of trees, your cousin stops. She pulls a flat stone from her coat pocket, one side smoothed with sandpaper, the other engraved with a tiny pattern of the floating gardens. "I made it," she says. "From the shoreline stones, take it." You do. It's cool to the touch and weighty in a way that feels right. You slip it into your pocket, the shape of it pressing against your thigh as a kind of anchor. "I'll be back," you say. She nods. You don't need to say when. Back at the houseboat, your bags are packed. Not that there's much. Just a few gifts, some sweets, a bundle of Firan fabric, the poetry journal page you retrieved from the jar, and now the stone. Your aunt hands you a tiny jar of saffron, to remind you there's always color, even in the snow. Your uncle clasps your hand, holding it for a beat too long. Your cousin hugs you tighter than expected. And then they all walk with you to the edge of the dock where the shikara waits. You climb in. The boat rocks slightly. The oarsman nods. No words, just movement. As you drift away, the houseboat gets smaller, cozier, almost like it's tucking itself in. You wave, they wave, and then the bend in the water takes them out of sight, but not out of memory. Not ever. And now, as the shikara glides further from the houseboat, the snow falling in steady, slow-motion spirals, you find yourself closing your eyes. Not because you're tired, but because everything you've seen is more vivid now behind your eyelids. The laughter, the spices, the hush of snowfall, the steam curling from cups of kehwa. The world is soft, still, wrapped in wool and walnut wood and poetry pressed into paper. You lean back against the boat's cushions, your breath misting gently into the air. The lake beneath you is quiet but alive, its surface rippled by the wind and the steady rhythm of the oar, like the breath of some ancient sleeping creature. Above, the sky begins to clear. One star, then another, each one a pinprick of calm in the deep velvet night. And you, drifting beneath them, feel entirely weightless. Not empty, but full in the gentlest way, like snow falling on water, like memory made tangible, like home, borrowed and floating. In the distance, a heron calls once, low and echoing, as if to say, "You'll come back. Maybe you will, but for now, you carry the houseboat with you, in the stone in your pocket, in the scent of saffron caught in your scarf, and in the slow, quiet rhythm your breath has learned from the lake. You let your eyes flutter shut. Let the last of the snow settle on your thoughts. Let the water rock you into rest. Sleep is close now, almost here. So hush, float, and let go. You're safe, you're warm, and you're still drifting softly, somewhere on the lake. Good night.